Hello, ladies. In this video, we are going to talk about the top guidelines to be successful. Um, during the 6 weeks that we're going to be together, there's going to be a lot of information that you're going to be learning. But these guidelines that I'm going to talk about in this video should be the most minimum things that you should always be following. Okay, so these are the habits, the healthy habits that I want you guys to start following if you're not doing so already. And not just during the 6 weeks, but I'm hoping that during these six weeks, you're going to be establishing healthier habits that are going to be more longer lasting. Okay, so let's get started. So the very first one that I want to talk to you ladies about is just eating whole foods. Um, the more we learn about nutrition, the more it seems that what we should be eating is the way people used to eat hundreds of years ago. There are so many different diets out there. There's the Atkins, there's the keto, there's the South Beach, diet. There's all these different diet, paleo diet. And every single diet seems to have different rules. Some of them require you to have more protein. Some of them require you to have more fat. Some of them require to have, a different amount of carbs. So it's very confusing, for people. But if you look at all those diets, the one thing that they all have in common is that they all ask you to eliminate the processed sugars. Okay, so I'm not talking the sugar from fruits or beets or carrots. I'm not talking about those sugars, but the processed sugars. So, and the easiest way of trying to eliminate these sugars that are really bad for us is by avoiding processed foods. And if we start trying to eat foods more in their whole, like in their natural state, the way you find them in nature, that's the way we want to eat it. So we want to avoid anything that's coming in a box as much as possible, anything that comes in a can, anything that has those really long expiry dates. Or when you start reading ingredients, if you have a whole bunch of ingredients that you can't even pronounce, like they say, if your grandmother can't recognize the food, then it's probably not a good food to eat. So again, rule number one, try to eat more whole foods. Like I said, foods the way you find them in nature. That's the way ideally you want to eat them. Okay, so instead of snacking, let's say in something processed or something that comes from a snack, you want to snack on a fruit, on a vegetable, on some nuts and seeds. The other benefit of eating whole foods is that whole foods are full of nutrients, of phytonutrients. And when we're eating more of these foods, you're going to be actually delivering all of these nutrients to the cells. When we're eating a lot of processed foods, which are foods usually just void of all these nutrients, then what happens is that our cells are starving. And even though we've been eating all day long, we're still hungry because our cells are starving of nutrients. So when we're eating whole foods, we're taking in more nutrients, we're feeding the cells what they need, and we have more chances of not feeling as hungry. Okay, so keep that in mind. The next rule that I'm going to talk to you about is never, ever skip a meal. Okay, so this is the schedule that I want you guys to follow. Okay, so you can write this down. On waking, the very first thing, if you're not doing this already, the very first thing that you need to start your day with is 2 glasses of water. And if you can squeeze the juice of half a lemon or lime, then that would be great. I do this every single morning. It's a great way to just do a very mild detox right from the morning. The lemon and the lime helps your gallbladder to squeeze out all those toxins and bile that gets accumulated overnight right into your gut so that things can get eliminated. So it's a very gentle way of detoxifying every morning. It's so gentle that it would be okay to do even if you were pregnant. If you have a tendency to have heartburn or acid reflux, then you may want to skip the lemon or the lime, but it's still okay to have the water. Starting your day with the lemon and the lime and the water also helps to alkalinize you right from the morning. And when we're more alkaline, we are going to be healthier and we're going to have less chances of inflammation and congestion and allergies and a whole bunch of other problems that we don't want. So the very first thing that you want to do is start your day with, at the very least, 2 glasses of water. But if you can add the lemon or lime juice, then that would be even better. The next thing is you need to have breakfast. And I don't want you to just consider, oh yeah, I have a cup of coffee. A cup of coffee is not a breakfast. Okay, so we're going to talk about protein in a little bit, but your breakfast should have a protein. Okay, and you have, ideally, breakfast should be within the first hour, hour and a half of waking up. Okay. Then mid-morning snack, only have one if you need it. I have some patients whose energy starts dropping a few hours after breakfast, or you start getting hungry. But if you're normally not a big snacker, then you can just have for sure the 3 meals, so breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But if you need to have a snack, then it's okay to have a snack mid-morning and mid-afternoon. If not, there's absolutely nothing wrong with just having water, just having herbal teas, of course, with no sugar. If you want to lose more weight, then just having breakfast, lunch, and dinner may not be a bad idea unless you're the type to like really crave carbs and sugars in between meals, then you may want to plan for a healthy snack during those times. Okay. But definitely in between the main meals, those are the main times when you want to try to keep hydrated. Okay. We're going to talk about how much water and, and how to keep hydrated in the next video. Okay. So then lunch should always be between 11:30 and 1 o'clock, more or less. When my patients are burned out and if your energy is really, really low, having an earlier lunch is not a bad idea. So closer to the 11:30 or 12 noon latest, as opposed to a later lunch, especially if you are working during the day. Most of us who work during the day, we're getting up. This is when we're using most of our mental power, most of our physical energy. So this is when we need most of our nutrients. So I think it's a big mistake what a lot of people do, a lot of women do, that they don't eat. They may start their day with a cup of coffee and then they don't eat anything until dinner sometimes, or they may not eat anything until a late lunch. So you're going through a whole bunch of hours during the day without eating, and these are such important hours, because this is when we're using most of our mental energy and physical energy. Okay. And then of course dinner should be ideally between 5:30 and 7 p.m. So you want to make sure that it's not too late at night, if at all possible. I know for some patients who have just specific schedules, sometimes a later dinner, that's all they can manage. If that's the case, then you want to make sure that lunch is your main meal so that you can make dinner a lighter meal. So if you are only able to have a late lunch, then for sure you want to make sure that that's not your main meal. Okay, like the lunch should be your main meal. So ideally, if possible, if you can arrange your schedule and organize yourself properly, then you want to make your dinner between 5:30 and 7 o'clock so that you can have, and again, we're going to talk more about this, but you want to ideally not eat for 3 hours before bedtime. Okay. And then bedtime should ideally be closer to 10 o'clock. Okay. Now, if you're at the moment going to bed at 1 o'clock, switching from 1 to 10 is going to be very difficult. So you want to keep in mind that you want to try to go to bed a little bit earlier. The better sleep you have, the more rested you are, the more chances you're going to find of not feeling hungry the next day. And of course, the more chances you have of feeling more energy the next day. Okay, so 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock is also okay. If you're currently going to bed at 1, then you may want to try maybe start going to bed 15 minutes earlier. And then once you're used to going to bed 12:45, try going to bed at 12:30. So it may have to be a slow transition for you. But ideally, the best bedtime to improve your hormones, to improve and feel more balanced, should be at 10 p.m., 10:30, 11 o'clock. Those should be the best times. And you want to make sure that you don't eat after dinner, ideally, but for sure, at least for the 3 hours before going to bed. Okay. And of course, all of these times you can still keep hydrated. You can have some water, you can have some herbal teas, of course, with no sugar. So all of that would be okay. Okay, perfect. The next rule that I'm going to ask you ladies to follow is I need to make sure that you're having protein with every meal, at least the 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And this is why I'm saying that you can't consider just a cup of coffee as your breakfast. You need at least 15 grams of protein for breakfast. So what does that look like? That can be, for example, 2 eggs. You know, if you can get the organic eggs, then those would be even better. They're cleaner. 2 eggs will give you a total of the 15 grams of protein. You can have a protein shake. You know, we're going to talk more about protein shakes in the next week. But if you have a protein shake at home, you want to make sure there's no sugar, you know, added. You want to make sure that you add it to like an almond milk, a coconut milk, and not to cow's milk, because cow's milk is more inflammatory. Of course, the protein can be some chicken or like a lean cut of beef, and you don't need a massive, you know, serving of the meat. All you need is the size of your palm and the thickness of your palm. That's about 3 to 4 ounces. If you actually have a scale at home, you can measure this. But if you don't need to go and get a scale. You just kind of eyeball it. It's about the size of your palm. That's about 3 to 4 ounces. And that's all we need. Okay, so we tend to eat 2 huge portions of the meat. So you want to be careful with that. And it can also be plant-based proteins, you know, so you can have some tofu, a good quality, you know, tofu, for example, or you can have legumes, you know, like your kidney beans or your lentils or your chickpeas, or like in the slide, we have the edamame beans. About half a cup to 3/4 of a cup of the beans would be considered your protein serving. Okay, so if you're currently a vegetarian, you don't need to have, you know, the meats. If you're not a vegetarian, it is a good idea to maybe choose to have the meats only for 1 meal of the day, and maybe choose to have a plant-based protein for the second meal, like for lunch or dinner. And then in the morning, you can have more of the eggs or the protein shake, that sort of thing. So, but whatever proteins you choose to have, you want to make sure that you have it with every meal. Okay, so breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Okay, perfect. The next thing, if you are going to eat meat proteins, you want to try to be really picky with the type of meat proteins that you do choose. So, for example, if you're going to have beef, you want to get a lean cut, you know, of the beef. And like I said, the size of your palm, you don't need those really big portions. If you are going to eat chicken, for example, you want to make sure it's skinless. You want to take out the skin, and you want to try to get the meats from grass-fed animals or free range or organic, you know, as much as possible. So I'll explain this a little bit more. The reason why this is important is because most of the toxins, most of antibiotics that these animals get injected with, get deposited in fat, in the fat tissue of the animals. Okay, most of the fat in the chicken and in poultry in general is in the skin. So if we're removing the skin, we're kind of okay with what's left. But if you can still get the organic or the grass-fed chicken, then that's even better. And you're going to find that the taste is completely different to the regular meats. Okay, so it's really, really important. I would highly encourage you to try that. For the red meats, all the fat is embedded in the meat fibers. And therefore, all the toxins and those antibiotics and everything, all the bad stuff that these poor cows, you know, get injected with, they're all embedded in the fat tissue, which is all in the meat fiber. So there's no way of removing it. So that's why it's really important, if you are going to have beef, to try to get a lean cut, you know, as much as possible, the one that has the least amount of fat. And if you can find the organic, free range, or grass fed, then that's even better. So when you go shopping, if you find a label that says no antibiotics, then that's pretty good, right? Because it means the animals have not been injected with antibiotics. But if you find a label that says no antibiotics and grass fed, that's the best, okay? Because if it doesn't specify grass fed animals, then that means that those animals could have still been fed a lot of carbs, especially corn seems to be like a common staple for these animals, which is not the healthiest type of diet, for them. And the healthier the animals, the healthier the meats, which is what we're going to be ingesting. Okay. So the best thing is to find something that says no antibiotics and grass-fed as much as possible. Okay. Okay, then the next thing that I want to talk to you about is when should you buy organic foods? Is there even a point of buying organic foods? So I have attached a handout, on the page right below the video. You can just download it. And it's a handout that talks to you about what we call the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. Okay. So this information comes from a website called environmentalworkinggroup.org. So EWG.org. And what they've been able to find is that even small amounts of pesticides and other chemicals that can be found in certain foods over time can cause a lasting damage to our health. So what the Environmental Working Group does, and just for you, for women who don't know what the EWG is, this is a group of people that are completely independent from any other company. So their opinions and their research are very unbiased, which is great. And they do research on just the environment, different types of research. But one of the things that they do every year is they check to see what foods are the most contaminated. So which foods are the ones that tend to absorb most of the chemicals and pesticides from their environment compared to other foods. So for example, what they've been able to find is that peaches, under the Dirty Dozen, you see the list there, peaches, apples, peppers, celery, these are foods that will retain a lot of pesticides, a lot of chemicals, from their environment, as opposed to, for example, avocados. Avocados, for example, they've tested thousands of avocados, and at the most, they may have like 1 or 2 little chemicals that they find, in the avocados. And maybe it's because of the thick skin around it, I'm not sure, but that's what the findings are. As opposed to the foods that do retain a lot of the chemicals are things like apples and strawberries, lettuce, grapes. So of course, it may be difficult to find all of these organic, but if you can, my recommendation to you is maybe just make a little photocopy of this of these lists, put it in your wallet whenever you go out shopping, or maybe now you're shopping online. Just remember, this list. And if you are going to buy organic something, then make sure that it's from this list. So it may not be necessary to maybe buy organic avocados, or it may not be necessary to buy organic grapefruits, right? But you may want to spend your extra pennies into buying maybe organic apples. Like, for example, the apples are really important. They say that 1 apple a week is way too many toxins for a child. So that's pretty significant. So, so keep this list in mind. I am not giving you this list for you to avoid these foods. That is not what I'm saying at all. You can still have apples, you can still eat peaches, you can still eat strawberries, but if you can find them organic, then the best thing would be to try to get these foods organic as much as you can. Okay, but there's no need to avoid them if you can't find them organic. Okay, so I want to make sure I'm clear with that. Also, a little note is rinsing the fruits or the vegetables will reduce some of the chemicals, but it doesn't eliminate them entirely. Okay, peeling is also a good idea because most of the chemicals will be in the peel. However, that's not ideal either because the peel has a lot of valuable nutrients. So in an ideal world, like I said, if you can find them organic, then great, get those, and that way you can still just rinse. I would still rinse them, obviously, but that way you can still have the peel. Okay, make sense? Perfect. Okay, so the next rule is sometimes it's not so much what we are eating that's affecting us, is what we're not. So I want to make sure that right away, and again, not only during the 6 weeks that we're going to be together, but this is for life. Every lunch, every dinner, you want to make sure that you're having a minimum of 2 cups of vegetables or salads for lunch and a minimum of 2 cups of vegetables or salads for dinner. Okay. And I want you to measure the cups. I've seen too many times that women have like maybe 4 little cherry tomatoes and they're like, yeah, that's about 2 cups. No, it's not. Okay. So I want you to measure your vegetables. I want you to measure your salads. Now, if you want to have more, then by all means, go for it. Okay. Why are these vegetables and salads so important? They're so important for so many things. So number one, they're going to keep your gut clean. So we're going to talk about in the following sessions the importance of keeping our gut clean. Two, they're giving you the fiber. So fiber is going to pick up a lot of different like bad hormones that you don't need anymore, and there's going to help you eliminate them. They're going to keep you alkaline. And they're going to keep you full. Vegetables are full of fiber, and that's going to get broken down slowly. So when things get broken down slowly, it gives us a feeling of fullness for longer periods of time, decreasing our chances of craving other stuff. Make sense? Okay, so lots of vegetables. The next thing that I'm going to ask you to do is take 5 minutes the night before and think about, or maybe on the weekends, and think about what your meal is going to be the next day or, for the next week. People that plan their meals beforehand or plan what their day is going to look like and what they're going to be eating, they're way more successful in sticking with their plan and not going off track. Okay, so please take a few minutes the night before to kind of like plan, okay, what am I going to be eating the next day? Okay. And the other thing, if you can, I know not everybody's a big fan of this exercise, but studies are pretty consistent. So I'm just here to give you the information. If you write down what you're eating, if you're keeping a diet diary every day, that does keep you accountable. There's more chances that you're going to stay on track. There's less chances of having that mindless eating, which I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. Many times, like I feel like, oh my, if I have like a bowl of nuts and seeds, let's say like in the middle, of the table, and then every time I walk by the table, there I'm grabbing like a handful. I'm grabbing a handful, and if I'm not being careful, I'm just eating mindlessly, and that's nuts and seeds. It could be other stuff. But if you get into a habit of writing down everything that you're eating, then you're going to be able to have a better idea of what you are putting into your system, and just it helps you to stay on track. Okay. I'm going to be asking you when I send you the progress reports to send me an example of one day of what you've been eating, but do the diet diaries for yourself to keep you on track. Studies show that it does help. So hopefully you guys will do that. Okay. The next rule is going to be, I'm going to be asking you to try to fast. What I mean by fast is stop eating. You can still drink, but stop eating for 12 to 14 hours every day. Not the 16 hours, not the 20 hours that some people do with intermittent fasting. I'm not asking you to do that. All I'm asking you to do is to fast for 12 to 14 hours every day, ideally from 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. Or, again, I'm assuming that you're going to have dinner by 6 o'clock. But if you're the type to have dinner closer to 7, then the same idea. Stop eating at 7 and then try to not eat anything until 8 o'clock the next day, which is when you should be having your breakfast. Okay. And like I said before, you want to stop eating for 3 hours before bedtime. Okay. So I'm going to get in more detail as to why this is beneficial in our next week session, because we're going to talk about insulin and insulin resistance. So, but for now, I just want to make sure that you do get started with all these important healthy habits. So again, after dinner, that's it. You're okay to drink. You're okay to have herbal teas. And for some of you, this may be really, really easy. You may be doing this already. And for some of you, this is probably going to be one of the hardest things you need to do, okay? The first 3 days, if you are the type to eat late at night, the first 3 days are going to be the hardest. You're going to feel hungry, but just keep on drinking your water, keep on drinking your herbal teas with no sugar, and that should get you through. After the first 3 days, it does get easier. Trust me, I see this all the time with my patients. You'll probably even find that you sleep better, because when we eat too late at night, that can keep us into like a lighter sleep. So, so please try that out. And if you've been eating the way I've been asking you to eat throughout the day, then you're going to be taking in enough nutrients and enough calories during the day that your body is not going to be craving. You know, there's less chances of your body craving and needing something else to eat after dinner. One of the problems why we tend to crave food after dinner is because we're not eating enough during the day. Okay. So please keep that in mind. So follow the schedule that I'm giving you, and you're going to find that it's easier for you to stop eating after dinner. Okay, perfect. So before I end this session, I just want to remind you that these guidelines that I'm giving you right now in this video are hopefully things that you're going to be following not only during these next 6 weeks, but hopefully habits that are just going to stay with you, you know, for long term. These are just the most basic habits that you can start following to start improving, you know, all of your symptoms, and to also be consistent, you know, and keep all these improvements consistently, you know, in your system. Okay. So if you have any questions, that's my email, info@mynaturalclinic.com. Otherwise, thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.